Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm the Capitol kind. So if you're curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Carter and I am your host. I am also the lead pastor of the Loft Faith Community in Westwood, California, and an associate professor of theology, ecology, and race. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing how to navigate those tricky family gatherings that you'll be having over the next few weeks, particularly for those of us who perhaps are related to people who have different politics or different theologies, especially if they ostensibly voted to take away some of your human rights. So we're going to be discussing how to navigate that complexity. In today's episode, I am joined by the entire crew. So how is everybody doing?
Doing okay. I mean, these last couple of weeks have felt very long, and I don't know if there's anything that happened in the world that is causing that, but they continue to feel very long.
What? It was daylight savings, Wesley. That's the problem.
Oh,
It's
right.
dark now.
It's just darker now.
That's why we're all sad.
Leave for work, and it's dark when I get back from work. It's just dark all the time.
That's the only reason.
What else could there be?
I have an internal darkness that just feels like is that
just an internal
time
as well?
Yeah, that may be. I don't know. It's like, oh man.
All we do just keep it pushing.
Yeah.
Hey man, it's all we can do.
Keep it pushing.
That's all we can do.
Supporting one another. Yeah.
I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. So perhaps we can end by discussing some of that. But I want to you know that we all had I put a call out and to ask people to send us emails and messages about maybe some topics or things we could discuss. And one of the consistent themes that came up from people that reached out to us was essentially how to navigate these next few weeks as people be gathering with family members, or even if they're not gathering, but just how to speak to people in their families with different political views, friends who voted for Trump or friends who are kind of falling in this kind of Christian nationalist trap. And it's tricky, obviously, right? Like this is a really difficult topic, but I think it's really important for us to address it because many of us, if we don't know someone, we know of someone who knows someone, right? Who might be in the same kind of particular situation. So I guess before we kind of get into this and discuss kind of some of our thoughts, do any of y'all have experience like having to navigate this challenge in terms of having a relationship or being related to someone that you're moderately close to who has different political and social views?
I mean, I don't. We had one of my cousins allegedly voted for Donald Trump in 2020. And I only heard about it because apparently she showed up to the house for a Sunday dinner and they all met her out on the yard. They said, "You can't come in here." They said, "You can't come in here. You can call us if you need something, but you can't vote like that and come in this house on a Sunday dinner like did nothing happen." So that's how we've been handling it, the blacks.
I saw that as a huge response, though. Like right away on TikTok, a lot of people were like, I saw this one guy who talked about how he is like the fun gay uncle and he always sends all the best Christmas presents and like pays for vacations. And his response was, "Y'all voted against my rights and the bank is closed. Like we're done." And I think that a lot of people are choosing to shut down relationships with people in their families or in their networks who were unwilling to consider their humanity in this election.
One of my really good friends did reach out to me because she's originally from Texas. She has a lot of friends in this world. And she asked me, she's like, "I'm seeing my friends now." She's seeing it differently, right? Like she's seeing it as more serious than she's seen it before. And she's like, "I don't know how to have these kinds of conversations. Like, what am I supposed to say? Like, and I think especially for white people, they're not used to having any sort of conflict kind of conversation that is not, it's not really part of that culture to really challenge people in the same way that I know it is in like my culture where you can't do nothing. Somebody's going to say something. So it is, I think, I'm glad that people are eager to learn and maybe apply, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think similarly, like, no one in my immediate family voted for Trump. And so I'll be going into Thanksgiving knowing that, you know, but it's not as if other sort of like challenging things haven't happened around the dinner table. So maybe, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, where one of my younger nephews, I say nephew, but you know, they're in their 20s, dropped the N-word at dinner with an A at the end. And like the whole table turned on them because that's not okay. So like, you know, we're not sitting idly by being like, oh well, now it's uncomfortable and now we can't talk about it. It's like, no, we're gonna have this conversation and we're gonna make sure you don't say it again, at least not in our presence, and we know that that's not welcome. And if that's how you choose to continue engaging, you don't have a seat here, because it's not a good place for you to say those things. And continue to just act like it's okay. So the willingness to engage in that type of conflict is something that comes natural to my immediate family. So it makes it easier when something does happen to sort of engage. But I can understand that people, because I guess what I'm thinking is, as people have gone through this election, they've sort of seen the vitriol and the hate sort of just keep mounting, and to have a family member, to have a friend, to have someone they know vote for that feels like how do you disconnect, or how do you reconcile the fact that like it's ever increasing and you're still in it, you're still in favor of it? It's I mean, I feel like it goes to like a values reality, and if you're wanting to put your feet on the table with people who have fundamentally different values that are okay with harming others, like I don't know how it can become difficult, and it would become difficult to then engage with them in a way that feels healthy, in a way that feels beneficial, in a way that isn't just sort of like acquiescing to the hate around us.
I mean, 100%. And honestly, there's no other appropriate time to say this, so I'm just gonna say this now. Wesley, there was when I was teaching in San Diego, I walked in on a class, and I got there early, and there were some white men in the class, and they're listening to some Kendrick Lamar, and they were rapping to Kendrick Lamar. And I was like, this is what y'all be talking like. And I walked in, and then all of a sudden everything got real quiet. I was like, oh, okay. It was funny. So
I saw Kendrick at a festival a couple years ago. Incredible show, but plenty of white people in the audience rapping along. And there was a couple people behind us who ended up saying the N-word as part of their singing, and like several people in our space like turned around and to look at them and be like, that's not okay. And then they sort of stopped and meandered elsewhere. But it was just like, you know, that wasn't a friendly situation to like turn on and be like, nope, please stop that. But yeah, it's
all you gotta do is give him a look. You give him a look. That's all I did. I walked in, and I was like, I just give him a look, shake my head, like, nah, you can't do that. And they're like, oh, okay. So yeah, no, it's music is definitely one of the places where you might hear that come up a time or two. I wanted to name something real quick before we get into maybe some of the tactile things that we might do. And there is a amazing essay, kind of, it's like a website book basically, by Tima Okun, called White Supremacy Culture. And she has these, I want to say she calls them like characteristics of white supremacy culture.
The pillars.
Or the 14
the
characteristics.
pillars.
Yeah. And like one of the things that she outlines, well, first, to be clear, what she's really talking about is she talks about how it impacts all people, and how it's hard even for white people, because this is a kind of trauma inflicted upon all people. And it's really about white, middle, and owning class folks. And I think that is a helpful framework for us to examine this, to not think that this just impacts people of color, but how it actually is trauma to all people, because you don't learn how to talk about your feelings. But one of the pillars, one of the things is right to comfort, fear of open conflict, and power hoarding. And I think this is what you guys are talking about in terms of how in these different communities, people are just like, I'd rather just not talk about it. I have this idea of, being in a safe space, quote unquote. And then again, there's a difference between actually like being in a space where someone is challenging you about what's happening and what you think, like, versus actually being in danger, right? Like there's a difference. And I think so often people conflate the two, like, I don't feel safe. Well, you may feel uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean you're in danger. And learning how to nuance those is critical. And so I think that's, broadly speaking, what we're talking about is how to, in certain situations, people want to shut things down, or they don't have the courage to have the conversation that actually just needs to happen. Again, my family, we don't, broadly speaking, we pretty much have the same politics. My family is more about getting everybody to vote rather than just getting them to actually vote for the right people. It's actually like, hey, you need to do something. But I have extended family who definitely have different politics, and navigating that is complicated. It's been complicated in the past. So there's, in some ways, I feel like I can definitely connect with this. And Blair, I know you had mentioned that this is something that you've had to, like in terms of extended family, that's a challenge as well.
My husband is a white boy from the northern suburbs of Atlanta who went to a segregated, or when it was created, a segregated private school. And my in-laws were raised Southern Baptist, and my husband was raised Southern Baptist, and my in-laws had to come around to the idea of me being a lady pastor. Like, that has been part of our relational development. And so we are certainly on opposite ends of political expectations. And the way I explain it is my in-laws they're just very Southern, and it's like this priority of politeness and niceness, and it, like, a tendency that avoiding conflict, right to comfort, right, that you should not be raising these issues in my house. Like, those are not appropriate things for us to be discussing. But when Trump was running the first time, my husband and I decided we needed to have some kind of conversation about it with him. And we tried, and it didn't make much of an inroad. But at least we tried. And I think we've been able to continue to have a relationship with them. One, because we don't live very close, so we don't have to talk about everything all the time. And because it has not created a clear and present danger to us or to our children at this time. Like, we have the privilege that their position in is not harmful to us psychologically or physically. Because for people who are sitting across the table from someone who's dehumanizing them, you shouldn't do that. Just, like, you don't have to. Like, you please stand up, walk away. But because we have the privilege of being white people in the society, straight white people, we talk all the time. Like, what if one of our kids comes out? Like, what if one of our kids is trans? What if one of our kids is gay? How are we going to navigate the relationship with that extended family? And what will the limits be?
You're also a woman, and you have a daughter as well. So, like,
that's true.
I'm curious how that sits in the conversation. Like, queerness and Blackness, like, those things certainly are, of course, important, but just women generally are about to be going through it. Mm-hmm. Women in those states are going through it.
Mm-hmm. And so my husband and I have just started talking again about how are we gonna broach this? Because to us, it's like there does come a point when it's not just go along to get along, that, like, in the spaces where we do have relationship and influence, that there is a certain level of responsibility to confront those positions. And we're working on it. And it's, it's also tough because it's like, I can say certain things as the daughter-in-law, but there are certain things my husband needs to learn how to say. And I can't do that for him. Mm-hmm. Right. So a lot of my work is supporting him in speaking for himself and speaking on behalf of others. And it's, like I said, it's not ever, I've said this before, and Julia, I think you named it too, is like, this is not everyone's work. But if you find yourself in a somewhat loving relationship with someone who is holding views that are harmful, dangerous, and dehumanizing, okay, then you are the person. There isn't anybody else around here, my friends. Like, you are plan A. And so I think that that's who I was thinking of as we prepped for this podcast, was the folks from our community who I'm sure are thinking of the person they're going to sit down across from at Thanksgiving dinner next week. And how the heck do they begin to chip away at what is a cultic mindset?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to say as a first kind of thing to consider before people bring this up, is to determine to what extent you want to maintain the relationship with this person or these people or whoever this is happening with. And by that, I mean, like, do that kind of discernment work and see if you're in a space to even engage in a conversation right now. Because if you're not, like, if you're still reactive, if you're finding yourself not being grounded in a space where you can feel a sense of openness to this other person, whoever that is, then it's probably not the ideal time to talk to them, because you're just going to be defensive and angry, which is going to cause them to be defensive and angry. So do that kind of internal discernment before you even begin it. And as I said, like, that's the same thing to me as determining, like, to what extent do you want to maintain this relationship. I mean, I'm definitely not advocating for, like, necessarily be like, oh, just start cutting people out who you disagree with. But you do need to do what I would say the compassion act is, to sequester some people. Like, some people who are not willing to grow or willing to see you as a full human being, some people who are not willing to engage you in authentic conversation, they don't deserve your time and energy and your patience. And I think the loving and compassion act is to sequester them, to say, well, if that's how you feel, know that if you're willing to ever have this conversation, I'm more than open to have a conversation where we exchange ideas and listen to each other. But if you're not, if you just want to tell me how I'm wrong or argue with me or not even hear what I have to say, well, then this relationship is not going to function like this. Don't let anybody do that kind of psychological or emotional harm to you, because it's just not, not only would I say it's not worth it, it's not worth your mental health, it's not worth your spirituality.
And it's not loving. Like, you
it
shouldn't be
isn't
treated
loving.
that way. If someone loves you, that's not how they will
Exactly.
engage with you.
Yeah, if they know how to love you, and some people need to learn how to love, like, they need to learn, you need to learn how. So that's what I want to say off the bat, like, just by prefacing by that. But if you find yourself in a situation where you actually are trying to or able to talk to someone who is willing to discuss different political views and willing to discuss different social views, then I think you have a few other options and a few other resources. And one of the ones that I wanted to bring up first, that I've mentioned a few times on this podcast, is the work of Loretta Ross. And she has a book coming out about calling in and call-in culture. I've had the fortunate privilege of working with her. I want to say it was 3 years ago. We were doing some work together at the University of California, San Diego. And we're working with broadly speaking, the same group of people with different approaches. I was doing anti-racism training, and she was doing this essentially calling in, like, training, which there's a lot of overlap and some divergence, but broadly speaking, I would say it's very similar. And what I appreciate about Loretta is, like, this framework really emerged from her own story of actually, like, trying to rehabilitate people who were leaving hate groups. So this whole idea of calling in came with, she was like, she tells this story about how there's somebody who left the Klan, like, and was like, okay, how am I going to be friends with this person? How am I going to help this person when I know there's still parts of them that are still wrestling with hate and hating me as a Black person? And she was like, if you actually want to help change the world and you want to invite these people to change, you have to be there for them in that process. And so that's how this whole idea of calling in even started, which I thought was just extremely, extremely powerful. And so she starts by trying to draw a distinction between calling out and calling in. And she names calling out as a process of identifying, like, the times we do something wrong.
Like when you walk into your classroom and there's a bunch of white men rapping with words they should not say out loud, right? Like, that's the calling out. That's the, like, you have broken the social contract and we are going to name it, and we're going to do it quickly and swiftly and sharply.
I just looked at him. I didn't even say it. I didn't have my eyeballs called him out. I was just like, yeah, y'all gonna stop doing that right now. I now keep the music going. Like, I'm all down for some Kendrick, but y'all can stop trying to rap. But that's an excellent example, actually, of perhaps calling on, which I'll get to in a minute. But much of what people would call, which I don't even use this term anymore, canceling someone, is what she would call calling out. And I think it's I guess maybe I'll stop here and let us, kind of get y'all's thoughts on this too. Like, there's something to be said, that we have created an online culture, at least, of calling people out when they do something wrong, of using that as a method of holding people accountable, is by saying, hey, you did this thing that we know is wrong, and naming that. And she argues that this isn't an effective method if your objective is to get the person to grow. If your objective is to... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's especially not an effective method in what is called high conflict situations. So Amanda Ripley is a scholar who's written about a text on high conflict. And the difference is things that are healthy conflict are things that there are really genuinely like multiple perspectives, multiple ways of doing something, like genuine disagreement about process or, but high conflict is things that tend to be embedded in like deep moral values, identity, like deeply held cultural beliefs. And high conflict often creates an us versus them dichotomy. And calling out in a situation that is already a conflict, that's a high conflict where emotions are very high, there's a sense of lack of safety, like there's all these other things bubbling underneath it, that calling out just creates a response of defensiveness and like deeper stagnation and deeper separation. And so is calling out effective in that situation? Because what we're talking about with white Christian nationalism, with Trumpism, with MAGAism, like these are dangerous ideologies that are dehumanizing and violent. So this is going to be high conflict. And so if calling somebody out is just going to cause them to retreat, then how do we heal the society away from that?
I mean, I think for me, I'm grateful, I should say, that I didn't grow up in an era of social media, because I said all kinds of ignorant stuff. Like, I don't know about y'all. Like, I would say things that I know I wouldn't say now, things that are definitely anti-Semitic, things that are definitely sexist, and offensive. And it's not recorded anywhere. It's not in any digital platform, but
Right.
I remember. And I was fortunate to be in spaces where, if people had said something to me, I tended to respond pretty like defensively, but sometimes I would be like, I just didn't know. And there were some things especially there's so many things that by that I mean like, there's so many things in the culture I grew up in, which is poor, urban, Black culture, that has bought into anti-Semitic tropes that I didn't know. I mean, I grew up listening to like, in the late 80s. So you listen to like NWA and all this other kind of stuff. When you listen to it now, I listen to it, I'm like, oh, that's like, yeah, I'm all down for what they're saying about the police, but then there's other things they're talking about too that are a little bit more problematic. And I just didn't know any better. And so a part of me appreciates about the notion of calling in, where it's invitational, as a way of inviting growth, as a way of saying, hey, what do you mean by this? Is one of the things she says, like, what are you trying to say here? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Tell me more, explain a little bit more your thinking behind this. And I find that to be, and has been for me to be, more effective than arguing with someone, because arguing for me has just not been an effective strategy. And Wesley, what you described actually with your, I think you said was your cousin,
Nephew.
nephew. I mean, it sounds, broadly speaking, like it was a kind of calling in. It was like, hey, we're not gonna let you say that, but it doesn't sound like it was necessarily combative.
I mean, we reacted. So the reaction was explosive.
He was disinvited.
It was
from the
absolutely combative. I've been called out by Wesley. Listen, Wesley will humble you and make you a better person. Okay, you will leave better than you came.
But I think that's also a difference between calling out and calling in, is that is the relationship, right? So if somebody who you already know loves you calls you out and you have a strong relationship, like sometimes that's fine, right? Like sometimes you just need to be humbled. But often we call people out who we don't know, who we don't have a relationship with. And Dr. Ross talks too about like that you can't call in someone that you're not anticipating or prepared to have a long-term relationship with, because calling in is inviting someone into a process of learning and transformation. And you cannot do that, as Dr. Carter said, if you don't have the personal capacity for it, and you don't have the capacity for that relationship to be one of a long-term investment. So it's a relationship.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I feel like what Dr. Carter was just alluding to is curiosity. And I feel like anyone can be curious about anything that anyone says, right? I think that people, especially people on the right, have a lot of ideas that have been given to them, and they've not really spent a lot of time unpacking them. And I don't need to be close to someone to be like, I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? Why do you think that? What exactly do you mean when you say that? And that doesn't mean I need to be their friend. They can go get a book or they can drag it through Google. Like, that is not my problem, but I can engage them with respect and curiosity, and maybe or maybe not, they will think about it and like do some research. I don't know. That's not my control, but I don't need to be their friend. And they certainly I never need to see or speak to them again, but I can still make an impact through curiosity. I like to think, or I'm wrong. I don't know.
I mean, I guess we'll all eventually find out. The thing that comes to mind with this whole thing is it does feel like the calling out, the canceling, that's sort of situated within sort of like an online presence, a reality where people don't have that relationship. And then we're saying then calling out is maybe not the most effective, but but we're really only talking about it in those places where people don't have relationship with each other, on Twitter, on
parasocial relationships.
Absolutely. Because the thing that makes calling in or calling on or calling in specifically effective is that relationship. But I don't know that like calling people out like is a bad thing. Like sometimes that jolt to the reality of or the thing that they're expressing needs to be felt, because what they're doing is jarring, what they're doing is violent, what they're doing is unacceptable. So I don't know. It's a hard reality to sort of reckon with, because I don't know, like no one's really being canceled.
Yeah.
There's this
Speak
like
on it.
narrative
Doesn't
that like
exist.
people are canceled and therefore never allowed to re-enter society. But like, think of any big canceled person, and the only ones that actually got canceled, I'm thinking about like
Harvey and Bill.
Yeah, people who committed crimes.
Right.
Yeah, they
Which is
criminals
not the
in
same
jail.
as being canceled.
That's called
like
criminal activity.
comedians who say dumb things and then they restart their comedy things with Ellen got canceled, but she has a new show and she's been touring. Like other people who've been canceled fully back in their own like world making money. So like it's this like fear of like being canceled it's not real, and in some ways I just feel like it's like a conservative talking point as a way to
100%.
dissuade people from like doing the thing of saying, hey, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And
no, I think,
yeah.
So one of the things that frustrates me, and part of the reason I stopped using like the word canceled or the word woke, is the ways in which the language that we create, that's inside our language, by we, I'm talking about Black folks here, gets hijacked by popular culture, particularly conservative culture, and weaponized in ways where it's turned against us. And so when I first started even using the term cancel on Twitter, back when Twitter was normal, like it was basically used as a way of a kind of a hybrid of calling out and calling in. It was a way to say, I am going to hold this person accountable in ways that's going to say that you have to do better if you want to maintain a relationship with me. Or I'm like, oh, you're canceled. Like it was serious, but also there was never the idea that it was permanent or anything like that. That was added. The idea of it was added by, I would argue, like conservative political folks, especially so they can be weaponized so that they can be victims. Because one of the things that just frustrates me to no end are the ways in which like conservatives, white people, men, anybody that's in a position of authority can try to be or play a victim, and to use that in a way to get power. Like they would be like, oh, I'm a man, I can't say anything right now. Oh, woe is me. I'm a comedian, I can't tell a joke right now. Woe is me. I'm a Christian, and before President Trump was elected, I felt scared to say Merry Christmas, but now I can say Merry Christmas and everything is okay. That is just a lie. Like that is a lie that they will tell themselves and tell others to try to make themselves feel a sense of superiority, that now they have this particular kind of power that they otherwise didn't have. And that's just not true. And what it does, for Christians, it turns people off to Christianity. It turns them off. When you are in a position of power and you claim to be a victim, all it does is help people. It pushes people to think that you are disconnected from reality, and that the religion you're practicing is actually disconnected from what's actually happening, in our culture. And it drives me crazy. It makes me so deeply frustrated.
But the reason that it's crazy making is because it's completely disingenuous. Like that's the thing that I can't. That's why I am over it, is because they know what they're doing. Like it's not like they don't. These people don't genuinely and sincerely fear anything other than the loss of power.
I don't know if that's true. Because there are people who genuinely are so separated from any kind of diversity or difference of thought. And Amanda Ripley talks about like the sources of high conflict. It's never about whatever the actual conflict is. It's about like the underlying emotions, and fear is one of the underlying emotions, and things that we don't know about and don't have information about and don't have exposure to can cause fear, even if there is not actually anything to be afraid of.
Even if there is no danger.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think so. This I am going to read straight from Tima Okun's article, which we're gonna have to put this in the notes because people need to know about it because it's really amazing. So this is what she writes. She writes about white supremacy. White supremacy culture's number one strategy is to make us afraid. All of the characteristics listed here are driven by fear. We fear not being good enough, not being enough, not being lovable. When we are afraid, whatever the reason, especially when we don't have the skills to hold that fear, we are easily manipulated by any false yet powerful sense of safety. The promised safety is false because it always based on the abuse and misuse of power that shows up as everything from microaggressions to deadly violence directed at whoever or whatever we are told to be afraid of. And I think this is where I agree, Julia. Like, they're not actually afraid to say Merry Christmas. They're afraid of something deeper than that, right? Like, that's the actual fear. They're not afraid to say that, but they're not being authentic and genuine, but what they actually are afraid of, right? And so that's the frustration, is the disingenuousness. So you're right. They are being disingenuous, right? The claims of not being able to, bring your Bible to school and what's happening in Oklahoma, where it's like, oh, now they're going to use the Bible to teach history, which I'm like,
Not
if I
just
were
any
you,
Bible, though, lest we forget the Trump Bible.
The $60 Bible that includes the Constitution.
Oh God, I did not know that.
Well, yeah,
oh
that
man,
was the scandal, is that he didn't just buy Bibles. He got like a deal with the Trump people and bought the Trump Bible to put
It's
in
just
the
using
schools.
public funds to, buy something for a candidate. It's ridiculous.
Oh,
That's
God.
a topic for a whole other podcast
Absolutely
episode.
is. Absolutely is.
I'm like, yeah, that is wild.
I
That
think
is
one of
wild.
the things for me with Loretta, one of the things that stuck out in my mind was she says, you have no obligation to engage with someone who is incapable of showing empathy for anyone. Like, where does that fall in this conversation? Because isn't that feels to some of I guess I don't have any Trump supporters in my life, thank God. But if it feels like they would be in a space where they don't care about having empathy or showing empathy for anyone else. And so what do you do if that is your family member? Like, how do we balance this understanding that you have no obligation to do that, but also we want to also call on? There's a tension there that I don't know, that for me, I would find paralyzing.
Well, and we mentioned calling on. We've said it a couple times and we haven't defined it. And I think that is helpful because calling on is Dr. Ross's way of saying call upon the shared values, even if it's just humanity, right? Like call upon the common experience of being alive. And there are so few people in the world who actually genuinely cannot experience empathy. It's just whether or not they're willing to portray it in front of you. Right? And this is where, for me as a white pastor, things can get really hard because I'm in ministry to and with people who have voted in ways I find abhorrent, violent, and yet I know how deeply capable of love they are. And so I have tried in many spaces to do calling on with people to say, I know that you are a believer in Christ. I know that you are a proponent of healing. I know that you prefer, you are seeking kindness and compassion in your life. And I need you to know that when you say these things, it is not living into the ideals that I know you proclaim for yourself. And so I've been able to do that when nothing else has worked. But when that doesn't work, then sometimes it's just time to part ways.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say, Wesley. I think you have to, this is where I talk about sequestering is the language I've used, but it is you have to separate. And And it doesn't have to be permanent, right? It doesn't have to be a permanent action where you're never going to see this person again, but it is to let them know, like, this is how I have to hold you accountable, because to be around you is not safe, because the beliefs and actions and things that you are purporting are violent. Like, they are actually violent and causing me harm. And what I am seeing on social media and what I'm reading are, in particular, some of those situations and times when that's what's happening, where I think the part that does actually make me sad are the cases where grandchildren have told their grandparents, like, hey, if you vote this way, like, I am not going to, like, it will functionally damage our relationship. And the grandparents did it anyway. And then they're surprised when their grandkids are like, this is what I told you was gonna happen. And that's the part for me that's just like, that's sad. Like, that, I'm just like, I'm not angry at those. I mean, I'm disappointed that the people voted that way, but it's like, you are willing to, like, you're not willing to, because people say, "Oh, you're willing to break apart a relationship for politics." Well, it's before this isn't like some kind of team sport where, like, you're rooting for the
Cause and
blue team and I'm
effect.
rooting for the red team. Yeah, I'm like, before
People-
this happened, I told you, like, this is what it means to me, and this is why that matters. And if you love me, you need to take this seriously and understand what I'm saying. And what you've demonstrated to that person is you are worshiping politics. You love the idea of being politically right more than you love the relationship you have with your loved one. That's the choice you just showed them that you made. And that has to hurt deep. That has to hurt deep. And so I respect the person, and I understand the person who decides that, okay, we need to have a pause in our relationship until we figure out how we're going to move forward. And let's talk about where we do have common ground and see if we can continue to perhaps rectify that relationship. And hopefully it can be. But we'd be lying to ourselves if we saying that all these relationships are going to be able to be repaired, because both people have to want to do that work to grow. And right now, in our current political environment, where I would say often people on more conservatives than liberals are in a space where they want to be right, where it's not about like creating a relationship. It's like, no, I want to be right. I want to have this particular kind of power. That's going to be really difficult. And so this may be holidays where it's not time for you to spend time with those people, and collectively you may have to disinvite some folks. And I think that's okay. I want to say that, as like, I
Maybe it
think
needs
that's
to hurt.
okay.
Yeah, and it's painful for everyone, right? Like, it's not like it feels good for anybody. It's terrible
Exactly.
for everyone. I also have been thinking about empathy as a practice, and that, like, not everyone is practiced in it, and that, like, I know people, there are relationships that I've had in the past where, in situations similar to, like, considering politics, right? I would say, but what if that happened to you? Like, and it doesn't matter how horrific the thing is. Like, how would that feel for you? And that the response would be, you shouldn't even say that. How could you say that? That I'm a monster for even daring that they imagine something bad happening to them or to their children. And that for them has been enough for them to end a relationship with me, asking them to, like, put themselves in someone else's shoes, no matter how bad those shoes are. And I think that, like, that is the practice that I am missing from a lot of people. Like, that is the thing that they are too terrified to actually do. And that there is something about, like, there's like an assumption that will happen, but never to me. And so there's no point in even, like, thinking about it. But that is what empathy is. Like, that's how you get to it. That feeling of horror, you should have the feeling of horror that makes you shut down and, like, end a relationship with me just for asking you to feel it, is like what actual people experience. And you should feel that way. And, like, that, but then you should listen to that feeling and, like, do something with it, as opposed to being like, I shouldn't feel this. Like, that's where I, like, that's what I don't understand.
I mean, to me, actually, Blair, what Julia just said reminds me of the point you made last week about the distinction between vertical and horizontal morality. And I think that's what they're doing is they have with this vertical morality, their idea is very hierarchical. And they're like, well, if I love God, I have to feel this way. And that's more important than the horizontal relationship. Like, I don't experience God through my relationships with other people. I experience God by following by being loyal, actually, to this particular kind of idea of what I believe the commandments from God are, and that it functionally inhibits their capacity to genuinely to feel like it tells them that the empathy you feel is wrong. Like that's what, like, they will literally begin to feel. They're like, no, the empathy is wrong, because if you feel like that, you're not paying attention to the way you ought to feel based upon this interpretation of the religion and commandments in the Bible and whatnot. I mean, I hope that to me is what I'm thinking. If that makes sense to y'all, if
It
that
might even be
resonates with your
named.
experience.
Yeah, it might even be named as a failure of faith, right? So that if you are, so again, go back to whiteness, the cultures of white supremacy, right to comfort is one of them. So that if you are appropriately attuned in your spiritual life, that things that are wrong in the world should not trouble you, right? So that's actually like a conditioning. The individualism is an aspect of white Christian culture, and Emerson and I can't remember his co-author, but Divided by Faith. It's a 20-year-old text now that talks about the white Christian, evangelical Christian toolkit and individualism, and this concept that you are only responsible for your own salvation, and God is only speaking directly to you, right? That vertical morality, vertical divine engagement means that if you are distracted by the world, if you're feeling the pain of the people around you, that there's actually something wrong with your relationship with God. Because if you have the right relationship with God, you will know that you are saved and affirmed in your faith, and you will not have to feel that suffering. And so that it's an enculturation about how the world works, that in order to disrupt it, you have to break a worldview, which is then earth-shattering in other ways, right? And is that going to happen over turkey legs and stuffing? Probably not, right? So like when you're thinking about the amount of work that has to happen to actually change someone's mind in that way, it's so big.
Blair, that was wild. That is.
that was a lot. That's a lot.
I mean, I think that's accurate in terms of just what you're asking people to do. So, and honestly, Wesley, the reason I thought you might have something to say is because to me, this is when I have had students in my classes who are growing out of conservative spaces. They're going through a process of what Blair's describing. And I didn't know, I felt like knowing a little bit about your background and growing up that may resonate with your own particular kind of experience. Or maybe you're always just in a space where you're kind of questioning things, because you are, I mean, you operate with a hermeneutic of suspicion. That's just your default. Like maybe that's just how you've been.
Is how we might.
Self-titled
contrarian.
I mean, I think if I were straight, I would feel like I align more with sort of like having to like deconstruct some of those things. But like, you know, from the earliest that I can remember, knowing that there was something different always meant that like I might not just be getting everything that I need from like these scripture texts. There's something here that I'm not understanding, because I can't be hateful towards myself and have that be a good thing. So I can't adopt any sort of like scriptural text or biblical understanding that says you are evil, because that obviously never felt good. And so I was like, there's just something about this that I don't quite understand, and I have to do the work to encounter that. I mean, it's, you know, that's why I decided to leave UC Berkeley and go to a Christian school. Like I felt like that I could maybe explore it there. I think there were other schools that I could have gone that would have let me do that a little more than the one I chose in Iowa. But it, you know, that is the journey that I went on, and I still arrived at a place that I feel good about. I think the fact that I am gay, like I never fully adopted those beliefs, but I can totally see how that would be the case.
Yeah, I think, and I think I want to spend a few minutes here talking about just maybe perhaps a model we can see in scripture before we kind of pivot and talk, you know, have some conversations to wrap up. But Blair, I know you noted a couple of scriptures that you thought were helpful in terms of referencing to think about how we might look at what we see Jesus doing in the Gospels as a kind of calling in. And I do think you do see two examples of this. And one I want to specifically speak to is the one you have listed as when Jesus is corrected by the Syrophoenician woman. Like, I have preached on this and used womanist biblical authors. I might have to look up the article because there's a professor at Fuller Seminary. And what I appreciated about that text is, or this particular interpretation, is it's written in such a way where it identifies the woman's like capacity, her strength, her resilience, her like her willingness to have some sass, actually, to say, Jesus, you're wrong. Actually, you just
Can you just real quick summarize the story for us?
Oh yeah. So essentially, the Syrophoenician woman comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, I need you to heal my daughter because my daughter is demon possessed." And what's interesting is this happens right after Jesus is accused of being demon possessed, and that, I think, is something that people can often miss. And this demon possession, quote unquote, in ancient Israelite religion was kind of a language you used when someone was acting in ways that you couldn't hold it, you couldn't control them. They were speaking against like systems of authority and oppression. They were essentially calling people out. And some people say, "Oh, you must be possessed by a demon because you are actually politically active and resisting." And so that's something people would say. And so the Syrophoenician says, woman says, can you do this? And Jesus says, essentially responds by saying, "I'm actually here to do the work for my community. I'm here to do the work and heal and serve people in my own particular religious, community," which did not include this woman who practiced a version of ancient Israelite religion that was considered to be antithetical to what Jesus would have been taught and practiced within ancient Jewish traditions. And she just she calls him in. She does not call him out. She's like, but he responds by saying, he says something to the effect of, this bread is to be, given to children, not to the dogs. And she says something to the effect of, even the dogs can eat from the scraps of the table. And he responds by saying, "Wow, you're right. I shouldn't just." I'm not here just for my community. I'm here for all people. And the most powerful thing, and this is why I get so frustrated again when conservatives saying they don't want, why are women preachers, is every time Jesus has these conversations with women, he fundamentally shifts. Like, you see, like, he's like, "You're right." He's like, "You're right." Yeah, I think there's this shift where he just become it. You see this shift where there exists in Mark, this particular passage, where he expands the table. And he expands who he's reaching out to. He expands the ways in which he is imagining what the beloved community looks like. It's no longer limited, all right? And there's always this process of expansion of the table that takes place after he has these profound encounters with women, which is, to me, just a clear like critique of the conservative, any movement that says women shouldn't have ability to speak or actually be in any kind of ministerial positions.
So another one that I didn't put on the rundown, but is appropriate for where the conversation went, is another time Jesus responded to some female friends, Mary and Martha, whose dear brother had died, Lazarus. And Jesus goes to see Lazarus, but he's died. And he's like, "Roll, open the grave." And they're like, "Jesus, he's been dead a while. It's going to be smelly." And he raises him from the dead. But part of that story is the shortest verse in the Bible, which is Jesus wept. When Jesus finds out that Lazarus has already died and he can't heal him, the response is Jesus wept. So the idea that if God can cry at the experience of someone else, not even his own pain, but in sharing in the pain of his sisters Mary and Martha and the loss of his friend, if God can cry, then we should be able to cry with one another. And that, to me, is the kind of passage in Scripture. And it, weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn. Like, that is all throughout Scripture. So that is what tells to me that this idea of individual salvation, the individual above all else, the self-protective aspects of that lead us to greed and hate and isolation, that those are things that are not of the model of Jesus, because Jesus himself shows empathy, and Jesus himself shows a willingness to change his mind and to be influenced by his community. And so if that is the model of Christ and we are Christ followers, then that is our model too. And that like having that kind of conversation with somebody, that's doing scripture reading together, that's a calling in. Like that's a calling on. But it's heavy. It's heavy.
It is heavy.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's not easy, but these are the conversations that we know are not easy, but important to have. And I do know that as y'all will be having them, not just the four of us, but people that are listening, just know that we are with y'all in spirit, trying to help you, because we know this is difficult. I think this is the response I'm seeing to this election is fundamentally different than 2016, because I think 2016 people were kind of like surprised, and now the lines were drawn, and if you made that choice, there are definitely people who are feeling the consequences from a relationship perspective, and yeah, I think we're figuring it out as we go, and we're going to continue to have conversations about this as we see appropriate, and as that fits in with the broader work that we're trying to do here on the podcast. I want to end, since we will not be gathering next week. Reverend Blair and I are going to be at something called the American Academy of Religion, which is this giant festival of theology nerds.
Nerd Fest.
I mean,
I'm glad you said it.
Someone asked if there was going to be cosplay, and I said if jeans and a sport coat is cosplay as scholars, we're all just down there pretending to be scholars.
In some places, that is cosplay.
You got that right. I mean, well, anyway. So I think it'll be fun. I mean, it'll be fun to see people that I haven't seen in a while. But I mean, it's like 8,000 people. Like it's big.
Huge.
Like
and we're going to join some conversations with some folks who've also been doing podcasting on Christian nationalism, some scholars that we've mentioned on this podcast. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with folks.
Yes, I'm doing. I'm actually writing a paper right now that I'm responding to someone who wrote. She just finished publishing a book on Latin American environmentalism, but like not academic, but like what people in these Latino communities are doing in Los Angeles. She's a professor at Cal State Northridge and done some amazing work. So we won't be with you all, but we did want to leave. We're trying to think about what we want to end, and I thought this was Blair came up with an excellent question for us to ask as we wrap up: is when do you turn your Christmas lights on or put your Christmas decorations out? Like, when is it appropriate to start doing this, right? Because I know in my house, I have not made the choice to start listening to Christmas music, but my wife and my son have. And so that means we have been playing Christmas music basically since after Halloween. So
I'm glad you waited at least until after Halloween. Like, because, let's let these holidays breathe. Let's let them have their own sort of moment.
Settle. Let them settle.
Yeah.
Generally, I am very strict day after Thanksgiving gal. Nothing.
Me too.
Not a drop of it. However, I will say this year, the last few weeks considered, I started Christmas music on Monday and I'm getting my tree tomorrow. So, and like, that's not usual for me. Again, I'm very strict about this. I really believe that it starts the day after Thanksgiving, but since
it's a weird year.
I got my lights out. I put lights out on the front porch because I was like, I just need a little bit of joy. Just a little piece.
Yeah, I'm like, just give me a little joy, So I'm looking for it. Last year I didn't decorate fully, but this year I am. Everything, all out. So that'll be tomorrow for me.
So this is, I'm fully outside the mainstream in this. I mean, as I've mentioned before, I grew up Church of Christ in a Spanish-speaking congregation, very biblical literalists. Our faith community did not practice Christmas because it wasn't in the New Testament.
Ooh.
And so after, I think, age 7, our parents thought we were old enough to understand why we're going to stop. And so I don't have a practice of Christmas. And so I don't put up any decorations. And honestly, the decoration part, I can maybe get into some like cool lights and maybe a tree. The stress that y'all have about buying Christmas gifts, I'm glad I don't have any of that. So I don't have a when, because I just don't.
I suck at buying presents, as y'all know, so I don't have that stress. I've come up with alternative things that we do. So Gabby and I and Isaiah are taking a trip because I have realized to stop trying. Basically, to stop trying to do what I was doing and do something different,
Play to
but
your
no,
strengths.
Gabby actually, exactly. But my strengths are, going places and planning trips. Yep. I can totally do that. But we got lights. She got the lights and stuff out today. I don't think didn't start putting them up. but she got them out of the shed, and we're gonna put them up right when we get home. We get home a couple of days after Thanksgiving from visiting our families for the holidays, and we'll put them right up. And I do think I'm actually interested. I hadn't made the connection, Julia, but I think you're right. Like am more excited to do it this year. I think because I feel like I need some joy. And when you said it, I was like, wow, maybe that's because I'm normally kind of like, whatever. But I'm like, you know what? I want to see some lights. I want to see some happy. I want to see something that makes me feel like smile when I come home. And I think perhaps this Christmas lights will do it.
And I just decided we're going to do Joy on the 15th. The Preacher's Wife version. So thank you.
Perfect.
Growing up, we always watched the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. Yes, that is what it's called. Okay. And Christmas starts like Miracle on 34th Street, right? When Santa comes down at the end of the parade. And now I'm like, that's some commercial capitalist BS. Christmas can start whenever I want it to. But liturgically, I love Advent. I love the longing, the waiting, the yearning. And so I try not to rush to Christmas right away, but I will start listening to like Advent songs, and I'll put lights out, and I'll get my Advent candles out. And so, yeah, like some of the light, some of the sparkly, magical pieces, I'm definitely going to embrace. But I really, for my own sort of like spiritual rhythm, I try to push Christmas until it's Christmas. That's good for my health. But I got colored lights out last week, like multicolored rainbow lights. But I never buy I went to the store and bought rainbow colored lights because I thought they would be whimsical and fun, and I just needed a little whimsy. So I think I would have put them out even if it wasn't Christmas time. I just need like you said, I need a little joy.
I know. We are all in that place. Well, we want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. We hope you enjoy, whatever you'll be eating. I will be eating all vegan. No, there's no turkey. There's no dead animals in my Thanksgiving.
Why do you say it like that?
Wow.
It is a Thanksgiving of peace. It is a Thanksgiving of peace and no harm.
No dead animals on my table. Yeah. You are a terrorist.
I'm not cooking. I'm going to other people's houses, so I'll eat whatever they feed me.
I know. I just wanted to end on that. At some point, we'll have more conversation around my veganism, but I don't want to do that. But in the holidays, because it's put too much stress and pressure on people. So
you're fully right. It's just hard.
It's
hard to hear.
Well, thank you.
You take. Speaking of joy, it's like just keep taking more. It's fine. I can't even eat a shrimp anymore without thinking about you. So it's fine. Like, is there anything else you want to take?
You don't want to eat shrimp anyway, trust me.
Oh my God.
Saying that, and then I do it, and then I enjoy it.
Enough.
You don't want to do that.
But I do think about you whenever I do. I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. So it's working, I guess.
That is how it works.
That's
it just takes time.
It
just takes time. That's how it starts.
Godspeed to everyone in their travels and in their conversations, that the Holy Spirit might be with you to say the courageous thing and to protect you when you need it. That's my little benediction for us.
Amen. That was a beautiful benediction. Mm-hmm. Thank you for joining us for the Progressive Christians podcast. If you'd like to connect with us and be a part of everything we have going on here, you can find us on TikTok at the Progressive Christians, and on Instagram. Feel free to send us some DMs or just let us know. Again, any ways that we can help, any content y'all are interested in us discussing. We have some pretty cool guests we have going to be lining up over the next few weeks. I actually got confirmation I'm going to have one of my political science friends, once we get the data from the election actually out and we can read it. Andy's going to join us, who's on a podcast before, and that's just going to be amazing because he's brilliant and it'll be helpful. He's already actually given me some things that's been helpful in processing what's happened, but I'm saving them for later. So excited for what we got coming up. If you like the show, we invite you to please rate, review, share, and subscribe to us on whatever platform you're using. We are getting a number of reviews. Our stuff is increasing. So thank you all for listening and for recommending us and sharing us, and just keep doing that so we can keep growing the podcast and get this platform out there to people who really need it. Thanks a lot, and we will see y'all in a few weeks. Bye.
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 Bye.